Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the Elizabeth line will finally open this month. In part, Londoners will get to ride on a small stretch of Crossrail on the 24th of May. We'll have more on the light at the end of the tunnel for the network that is arriving nearly 4 years late and over budget. Russia will lose out on dealings with firms in the capital that offer PR and accounting services as part of a new list of government sanctions over Putin's invasion of Ukraine. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes, also on the way this evening. The Grand Master of Design, Kevin MacLeod, joins us as the live version of his hit show lands at the ExCeL. And the new programme giving people with sight loss a chance to enter the dance world will meet the MBE behind London's Dance Dosty. All of that is on the way this evening, but first tonight, the delayed and over budget Crossrail project will finally open this month in part. The Elizabeth line was due to open in December 2018, though the 24th of May has been scheduled in a few weeks' time. However, passengers will not be able to travel on the whole route from Essex to Reading just yet. Alicia Edwards had more.
When it first opens, the new Elizabeth line will run between Paddington and Abbey Wood from 6:30 a.m. until 11 p.m. Initially, trains will not run on Sundays or call at Bond Street. The lines will be operating in 3 separate sections at first, with passengers needing to cross to each line. But when it opens fully, the line will stretch from Reading to Shenfield in Essex and Abbey Wood in South East London. With it being set to open in just 20 days on the 24th of May, let's take a look back at what it's taken to get to the opening of the Elizabeth line. Well, construction began in 2009 when then Prime Minister Gordon Brown and then Mayor Boris Johnson saw the start of the work. In 2018, Sadiq Khan was told that a new opening date of December 2018 could not be hit. There were then further delays and an increase in the cost of the project from £14.8 billion to £18.9 billion, which saw the opening move again to now. Today's announcement is actually slightly earlier than many expected. The opening of the Elizabeth line will be just ahead of the start of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. It's hoped the Queen will be involved in the opening. The Mayor said the Elizabeth line will make London safer, fairer, greener and more prosperous, saying it will revolutionise travel across the capital and the South East. Well, all of this is still subject to final safety approvals, with the Bond Street Elizabeth line station not being ready to open this month. The station is expected to be completed by the end of the year. Services will also not run on Sundays to begin with to allow for further work, but it is due to run on Sunday the 5th of June for the Jubilee weekend.
Well, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has accused Labour's London Mayor of breaking pre-election rules over the announcement. Sadiq Khan spoke about the launch today.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into mudslinging like Shapps is. He needs to grow up and join the party, a legal, lawful party, by the way, not breaking any rules, which is what Londoners are doing in advance of the new line opening up on the 24th of May. The decision to announce the opening date was made by the Commissioner for today for a very simple reason. We don't want any further delay. We've only got 20 days now to make sure the rotas are sorted out, the trains are ready, the stations are ready, so it opens on the 24th of May. The sourpuss from the Secretary of State for Transport is another example, I'm afraid, of this government's anti-London stance.
The Mayor, Sadiq Khan there. Some other stories from the capital today. Russia has been banned from using British management consulting, accounting and PR services, most of which based in London, in a new set of sanctions announced by the UK. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the ban will cut off service exports critical to the Russian economy. Other sanctions among the 63 introduced today target Russian media organisations and those working for them. The government said UK accountancy, management consultancy and PR account for 10% of Russian imports in these sectors. The killer of Sarah Everard is challenging a sentencing order that said he should not be released from prison until he dies. Wayne Cousins' appeal is part of a major review by the Court of Appeal of whole life orders, including arguments for their wider use. His lawyer said his remorse and guilty plea should be taken into account. There are 64 people currently in prison in England and Wales under whole life orders, which are reserved for exceptional cases. A huge fire at an industrial bakery in Park Royal broke out in the early hours of this morning. 20 fire crews and around 125 firefighters were called to the factory on Minerva Road at around 3:20 in the morning and found most of a single-storey industrial bakery alight. Local residents were asked to keep their windows and doors closed. 11 gas cylinders were removed over fears they could explode when exposed to heat. A man has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in Pinner in Harrow. A man in his mid-30s was found at the location with stab injuries. London Ambulance Service and London's Air Ambulance attended the scene in northwest London. Despite the efforts of paramedics, that man was pronounced dead at the scene. Senior Conservative Neil Parish, who admitted to watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber, formally quit as an MP today after announcing he would resign on Saturday. Under an antiquated system, he was appointed to be steward and bailiff of the Manor of Northstead. MPs are not able to directly resign their seat under a 1624 resolution of the House. The Treasury said it has accepted the Tiverton and Honiton's MP's resignation. A reminder that tomorrow is the local elections for 2022. Your time to cast your vote to decide who will be your local representatives, with London deemed the key battleground. Politicians have been on the road for some weeks now, pounding pavements and knocking on doors as they try to convince voters every council seat in London's 32 boroughs is up for election on Thursday. A chance for 6.2 million voters in the capital to bring in a new set of councillors alongside 5 local mayors. The elections will decide who runs local services such as schools, libraries and bin collections. Now, a quarter of people who sought mental health support during pregnancy or after becoming a parent didn't feel their issues were taken seriously. That's according to a new poll released today by the Pandas Foundation, a charity dedicated to improving perinatal mental health. It says many of those questioned for the research highlighted long waiting times leading to challenges bonding with their babies and in some case intrusive or suicidal thoughts. Annie Belasco is the head of the charity.
So our foundation, Pandas Foundation, conducted a study that we sent out to parents and carers who may have or previously had experienced issues around their pre or postnatal mental health, perinatal mental health. And what we were asking is what their experiences were with the NHS, because a lot of our callers that we've received, we've been inundated since the pandemic. Our services have risen by 70% higher than pre-pandemic. And the majority of our service users have come back and said that they felt that they have waited too long for appointments to access perinatal mental health support.
So would you say then that there's evidence that the NHS is unable to cope with the government's sort of living with COVID plan?
So we feel as a foundation, we have huge respect and empathy for the NHS. We know that their services are overstretched and under-resourced. And it's all very well the government putting this amount of money into this and making a plan for this and committing to that. But that actually doesn't impact the individual there and then who's waiting for an appointment. The NHS work tirelessly to meet the needs of everyone. But unfortunately, due to circumstances such as the pandemic and the sheer volume of parents needing that support within the NICE guidelines of 6 weeks for a referral, we're finding that many of our parents are saying that that is too long for them and their needs aren't being met. And that's where our foundation come in as Pandas. We act as an early intervention service. We're not trying to replicate the NHS, but what we can do as the leading perinatal mental health charity is give good, solid advice, support and coping mechanisms for those parents that are struggling at an early stage.
Annie with me there, more on the Pandas Foundation website if you are affected by that one. Two more headlines to bring you. The Ineos CEO, Sir Jim Ratcliffe's late £4.25 billion bid, submitted on Friday to buy Chelsea Football Club, has been rejected out of hand. Ratcliffe is widely regarded as Britain's richest person. It comes as another key bidder, Seb Coe, insisted that Chelsea must not be saddled with debt after the buyout of the club is completed. Coe's comments come after Roman Abramovich sparked fears that he will back out of plans to write off more than £1.5 billion worth of loans, which could jeopardise the sale of Chelsea, now entering its final stages before the May 31st deadline for bids. And a new photographic portrait of the Queen, titled Platinum Queen Felicity, was unveiled in the capital to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee. It's the work of artist Rob Munday, who launched his exhibition Presence at 45 Park Lane. Robert took the opportunity to take the photo of the monarch when she was smiling, apparently after an amusing comment made by her close confidant and dresser Angela Kelly, who was helping to rearrange her clothing at the time. The Jubilee takes place on the 5th of June. Let's just take a look at the weather for you now. Sun breaks in the cloud this evening, allowing temperatures to dip into single figures by first thing on Thursday. Tomorrow looks like it'll be a fine and warm day, highs of around 21 degrees. Always quite a bit of cloud around as well. Friday, sunshine and showers, but again feeling pleasant with highs of around 20 degrees. Taking a short break now, but still to come in the next few minutes. Kevin MacLeod on making the building trade more sustainable, and his choice words on the state of London's new large-scale developments filling the skyline. Welcome back. Let's take a look at some of the day's main business headlines for Londoners. The shopping and payment service Klarna will start to report the use of buy now, pay later products to UK credit reference agencies from June. It will report consumer purchases paid on time, late payments and unpaid purchases. Klarna said the move will protect customers and provide the industry with greater visibility of buy now, pay later use. Online fashion giant Boohoo has revealed that profits slumped and costs soared as it struggled to get to grips with difficulties caused by the pandemic. The bosses said pre-tax profits for the 12 months to the end of February plunged to 7.8 million. That was down from 124.7 million a year earlier as distribution costs rose and customer demand fell. And business and government users on Twitter may need to pay a slight fee to stay on the social media platform. That's according to Tesla boss Elon Musk. It comes after the board of Twitter agreed to sell a $44 billion takeover offer from Mr. Musk. However, he said that the site would always be free for casual users. Now, a special interview for you this evening. The design master Kevin MacLeod is back at London's XL this week for the live version of his TV show Grand Designs. In recent years, the exhibition has focused towards improving sustainability and environmental practices within the building trade, and this year is no exception. Well, Kevin joined me and we spoke about the homes of the future, how we might be able to make our lives easier in extreme weather here in the capital and amidst the cost of living and energy crisis, as well as his thoughts on London's rapidly growing skyline.
We try and sort of blend the hard end of the stuff, like solar panels and bricks, with some of the weirder, wilder stuff as well. The eco stuff, the hairier stuff, and lots of recycling.
That's kind of the big thing at the moment, and the most important thing in new design. How do we be cost efficient in new designs and new homes and eco-friendly? What are the kind of things that people will see, and what are the kind of things that are coming out that are trying to do that in new homes?
Yeah, well, on the one hand, of course, there's amazing tech emerging all the time, like new solar panels. But I'm looking forward to the lithium air battery, which is going to revolutionise electric cars and electric homes. Of course, the government's been driving us all towards heat pumps and those kind of new electric technologies. And I guess a lot of people have questions about those and about how they're going to work and have them. And we've got a special Ask the Expert centre right next door to a house that we've built, which is a super low energy house, and it's full of tech and it's full of ideas. But basically, it goes back. I mean, you talk about new ideas, new stuff, but I'm very struck by the fact that some of the best technologies are ancient, and it's a fabric first house, which means that it's built in such a clever way that it looks after itself. So you don't have to put too much tech into it. It's naturally super insulated. It's got thermal mass in order that it can stay cool in summer. It's designed in such a way that it allows for ventilation to move through the building to keep you cool in summer. And it's really well built. And so when you build like that, you then don't need to add loads of kit, although it's got a few extra gizmos as well to really make it fun and enjoyable. And when you build like this, to be so thermally efficient and so ecological, you then, by putting on, for example, solar panels on the roof, you turn the building effectively into a net exporting energy building. So it's a building which can start to earn you money. And I think, well, I hope, and I said this 10 years ago, but I hope in 10 years' time, we'll all be wanting to live in homes that do this and which are available. But I'm giving a talk tomorrow about how we deal with summer cooling, because, in the winter, everybody was complaining about, do we heat, do we eat, with the cost of living crisis, how do we all manage? And but going into summer, if we have some days like we did last year in June and July, then we're going to really bake and overheat. And I remember listening to the radio last year, and people ringing saying, "Oh, do I put air conditioning in? And I found myself shouting at the radio in the car, "No, just do what the termites do." And so there are some amazing devices and inventions which Mother Nature has already figured out over millions of years, such as the termite hills, which actually give us a real clue as to how we can cool ourselves and cool our environment without resorting to spending a lot of money on energy. Because although heating is a substantial represents a substantial part of global emissions, of course, domestic heating, so does domestic cooling. So we can be far more clever. I'll give you a clue as to what I'm going to talk about, which is the fact if you walk down an Italian village or a little French village in the south, you'll find little old men and ladies coming out of their houses with buckets of water, and they're washing their front steps and throwing the water over the stone. And it's not to keep the stone clean. It's because the water evaporates off, and as it evaporates, it requires energy. It's trying to find heat in order to make that change from liquid to gas to water vapor. It's called phase change. I don't expect anybody to kind of really get into it. I'm excited by this, but it's what makes a fridge actually work. It's what makes air conditioning work. And you can do the same thing in a really crude way with a bucket of water and get cool air as a result. So, we'll have a play on the stage. I'll see if that works.
Well, that is really interesting because obviously all the focus in the last few weeks, months, has been on how do we heat our homes, the price cap, everyone, scared about these sort of things. But no one's talking about what we're going to expect, particularly here in the capital when it gets ridiculously hot as it does for a couple of weeks every year.
Indeed, and I think one of the great hidden secrets of the capital is that it is one of the greenest cities in the world. And despite the vast amounts of tarmac, despite the fact that, London streets can be 2 to 5 degrees hotter than streets in other towns and cities in Britain, simply because of the amount of tarmac and concrete. London also has millions of trees, and each tree on average is worth about 8 air conditioning units, because trees actually move water through their systems by evaporation. So it's the evaporation which creates the displacement of water through capillary action, just reaches up into the leaves to replace the water which is evaporated off the leaf. But again, evaporation is the thing which cools the air around the tree. So if you sit under a tree, it's always going to be cooler. And streets in London with trees are up to 12 degrees cooler than streets without trees. That's an amazing difference, isn't it? The difference between 32 and 20 Celsius. And not only that, but those streets with trees are worth more. They're worth about 15% more. So, if you haven't got trees in your streets, then get together with your neighbours and, dig some holes.
Yeah, or write a letter to your local councillor.
Well, yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
I must ask you, your focus is design, but you're very architecturally savvy, generally speaking, as well. And I saw a picture the other day in a paper of London skyline, and it was only 20 years ago, from the top of the Greenwich
the observatory,
and it's gone up unbelievably so. What do you make of all that? All these new,
it's awful,
high rises, and even the sort of architecturally trying to be a bit different ones. 8 Bishopsgate, the sort of new fancy things like that. How do you see all this?
Well, so the difficulty I have with this is sort of 2 or 3-fold, really. The first is that it's very quick. That the buildings that go up in the City of London are costed in terms of their rental income, versus build costs on a sort of 25-year, maybe 50 if you're lucky, but certainly often 25 or 40-year basis. So the buildings aren't designed to last very long. So it's not as though they're making a great contribution. St Paul's Cathedral, built throughout the 17th century, took a long while to build, but it's still there. 350 years later, it's still doing its thing, and it's a wonderful landmark. And I look at things like Battersea Power Station and Bankside, which is now, of course, the Tate Modern, and they too are really well built solidly in the 20th century. Battersea, of course, is being converted into 8.5 million flats, and in between those two buildings, along the South Bank, other than the area which we call the South Bank, which has lots of public access, the further west you go down the Thames, the more that land is in private ownership, and the harder it is to walk along the South Embankment, because you just hit another development. Not only that, but these developments effectively have formed a kind of forming a 20-story high wall, if you like, which denies anybody living south of the river in a house, say a street or two back, a view or access to the river. So I don't see the development that's happened along the south of the Thames as being progressive. It's not socially inclusive. It doesn't try to do things for existing communities. And I think it's a huge mistake with development that when stuff comes along, the view of the developer is say, well, here's the red line, we're going to work within this, we're going to maximize the floor plate. One of my least favorite buildings is that thing which is, I think it's called the walkie-talkie. It looks like a giant Gillette shaver. It's got a bigger top floor than the base. It's so greedy. As it grows up, it reaches out over the road to grab more footprint, and I think that's awful. I mean, it's so nasty. And yet there are examples, of course, there are great examples of places and buildings which are generous, where developers have said, well, actually, we won't be too greedy, and what we'll do is we'll give something back to the existing community, and we'll stitch our development into that community, and we'll scale it in such a way that it feels like it's part of that place, And I think you hit the nail on the head in describing this as happening in 20 years. The fact that it's it's always been revolutionary. It's happened so quickly, it's happened so aggressively without us noticing. It's an indication that progress is probably a good thing, but fast progress isn't.
I'll ask you one final question. I'll go obviously back to Grand Designs Live, and it's of course part of the main show. Been going since 1999, some time, but it's only going to get better because of how technologically advanced things are getting in homes and the way we look at things and all the new technology that is on offer. Are you excited about making more and more that's just going to get more and more interesting?
Oh yeah, look, I mean, first of all, the series that we make, the only reason we carry on making it is because there are always new, fabulous, interesting stories. And the series that we're broadcasting right now, The Streets, that's all about community and collective building and affordability. The series in the autumn is a new series of Grand Designs, but each one of the projects we've never done before. So there's always that freshness and excitement, and there are new ideas and new tech, yeah. But not just that. I think actually what's happening in nanotech, in biotechnology, in all kinds of technological areas, makes the current time, the early 21st century, I think the most exciting time to be alive since the Renaissance, because it's affecting and beginning to affect all our lives.
Kevin McLeod there. Grand Designs Live is at the XL until Sunday. Right, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. A reminder of our top stories coming up after the break. Plus, celebrating diversity in the dance world, we'll meet the Londoner who has dedicated the last year to giving blind people a chance to perform. The project culminating this evening with a special performance in Newham. Stay with us.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our top story from today. The delayed and over-budget Crossrail project will finally open this month, in part. The Elizabeth line was due to open in December 2018, though the 24th of May has been scheduled in a few weeks' time for the opening. However, passengers will not be able to travel on the whole route from Essex to Reading just yet. Alicia Edwards had more.
When it first opens, the new Elizabeth line will run between Paddington and Abbey Wood from 6:30 a.m. until 11 p.m. Initially, trains will not run on Sundays or call at Bond Street. The lines will be operating in 3 separate sections at first, with passengers needing to cross to each line. But when it opens fully, the line will stretch from Reading to Shenfield in Essex and Abbey Wood in South East London. With it being set to open in just 20 days on the 24th of May, let's take a look back at what it's taken to get to the opening of the Elizabeth line. Well, construction began in 2009 when then Prime Minister Gordon Brown and then Mayor Boris Johnson saw the start of the work. In 2018, Sadiq Khan was told that a new opening date of December 2018 could not be hit. There were then further delays and an increase in the cost of the project from £14.8 billion to £18.9 billion, which saw the opening move again to now. Today's announcement is actually slightly earlier than many expected. The opening of the Elizabeth line will be just ahead of the start of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. It's hoped the Queen will be involved in the opening. The Mayor said the Elizabeth line will make London safer, fairer, greener and more prosperous, saying it will revolutionise travel across the capital and the southeast. Well, all of this is still subject to final safety approvals, with the Bond Street Elizabeth Line station not being ready to open this month. The station is expected to be completed by the end of the year. Services will also not run on Sundays to begin with to allow for further work, but it is due to run on Sunday the 5th of June for the Jubilee weekend.
Now, a year-long pilot to improve accessibility in the dance world will culminate this evening with a special performance in East London. Dance Dosti is the brainchild of Rashmi Becker, who was awarded an MBE for her services to people with disabilities. The programme, which now plans to launch permanently, has helped those with different levels of sight loss to take part in dance for the first time. Rashmi told me more earlier.
Well, I set up Step Change Studios to address the lack of opportunities for disabled people to take part in dance. And then during the pandemic, I became really aware of the disproportionate impact on people from certain ethnic backgrounds, and of course it was hitting disabled people disproportionately. And because I worked with a lot of blind charities, I was also conscious that they weren't very diverse.
Yeah.
So I had conversations with them, and they were keen to reach a more diverse audience. And being South Asian myself, I created a program called Dance Dosti, and Dosti means friendship in different Asian languages. And the program is aimed at people from a South Asian background who are blind or partially sighted.
Yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit about what kind of course they get taken on when they enter into Dance Dosti, because I mean we've got a picture behind us there, and we've got some clips as well. It's a sort of a baptism of fire in many ways to get yourself out and dancing.
Yes, it's you know, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it properly. So we've been super ambitious. So this program is in partnership with Metro Blind Sport and funded by Vision Foundation, and it's involved 3 parts. The first part, which was during sort of the peak of the pandemic, was all online. So we created over 100 dance workouts in video and audio format and in different languages. So we had Hindi, Bengali, Gujarati and English. And we also had standing and seated forms of dance as well, so for people with different levels of mobility.
Yeah.
And then that was to support a transition really into some face-to-face opportunities. So we've been running pilot programs around parts of London that have higher South Asian populations. So that's been Newham, Tower Hamlets, Brent, Harrow and Ealing.
And it's all culminated in a performance today in Newham. That must be incredibly exciting for them. And as you say, that change in confidence from when they first walked through the door must be huge to do something like this in front of people. Yes,
and I think people can't underestimate the barriers that disabled people and people from, in this case, a South Asian background experience. But you know, race and disability, the amount of stigma that people have talked about, you know, has still been surprising to me, even though I hear lots of stories, but people directly being told you can't join this gym because you're blind, or just feeling like they don't belong. And that's one of the things we've been doing with this program as well. We've been working with the dance and fitness sector to try to improve inclusive practice.
That performance took place, that was at the Black Box Theatre at Newham Sixth Form. Well, and there's more info at dancedosti.com if that's of interest. Right, stay with us for our final part of this evening's programme. Shakespeare Company's Siobhan Redmond takes the lead in the English premiere of The Straw Chair. Siobhan has been telling us more about the true story behind the play.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Now, the Coronation Street star Chris Harper has joined the cast of The Da Vinci Code in the capital to play Robert Langdon in the title role. The play, based on the best-selling novel by Dan Brown, is touring the country and has this week arrived back in London for a run at the Richmond Theatre. Well, Alicia has been hearing more.
Jacques Sonnier was murdered tonight.
It's a miracle that they could compress it in 2 hours with an interval, considering the audio book's about 17 hours long. So, you know, there was a lot of pressure anyway to begin with to put this epic onto a stage, and not only that can be toured around, because there's also visual effects and sound effects, and it's a bit like touring with a rock band, really. You know, so all of this stuff's compressed into this little 2-hour show. So it's a miracle it got to this stage, never mind touring around and, you know, getting the reception it deserves, I think, just from a design point of view.
Between the three of us, we will understand what is absent when we can see what's present.
My character's like the puppet master, of the piece. And, he's one of those characters that is not what they seem. And without sort of giving away the plot to people that haven't seen it, well, obviously there are always many. He's the sort of the link pin nearly to it all.
Chris Harper's just joined the cast. How are you finding rehearsing him into the show? Because it's quite a big change, isn't it, adding a new cast member like that?
Yes, I'm used to having my leading man changed. In Death in Paradise, they changed him 4 times. So, it was kind of quite normal for me to see the leading man change in front of my very eyes.
Has it changed the way the show runs at all for you? Does it give it a fresh feeling?
It feels slightly different, obviously, because it's a different performance. But I mean, that's what's great about the ensemble cast that's doing the show. It's such a strong ensemble of actors that it was like putting a glove on.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me. You've taken over the role of Robert Langdon. How are you finding joining the cast and what's already kind of a well-oiled machine in that way?
They're such a nice bunch, and Danny's just a dream to work with. He's so funny, and he's always there with a sort of a giggle and a hug and his sort of little jig. He's always dancing and singing backstage. But the company are just wonderful. They're just sort of born through thick and thin and COVID and all sorts of stomach upsets and all sorts. It's been a rocky road, but the audiences have loved it, and that's kept the show tight. And it's a really lovely thing to do.
How much did you know of the Da Vinci Code before? Had you kind of read it and seen the movie?
I've got to be honest. I didn't read the book when it came out. I sort of vaguely I'd seen it on 1,000 people's laps on trains as they sort of turned the pages as quickly as they could, But I didn't watch the movie until I got cast. I didn't read the book until then. And I've just recently really discovered just how many people are massive Dan Brown fans. But it doesn't work just for Dan Brown fans, actually. I really love the play. It's really good fun. And I hadn't sort of cottoned on to the whole sort of Opus Dei underworld kind of Christian themes thing at all. I hadn't got any of that.
And perhaps gets to the point of the plot a bit quicker than the book.
Well, we're in and out in 2 hours. It's great. You'll be back in the bar by 9:30. We don't leave you dawdling in your seat. You'll be on the edge of it for an hour and a half, quick, and you're back in the bar.
Even the film, they're all quite fast moving, even though long. But what they've done is they've managed to sort of get the story in a theatrical time, and keeping the integrity and the pace of the piece, and I think they've done an amazing job, and the audience reaction is there for everyone to see.
There you go. That show is on at the Richmond Theatre until Saturday. Now, life on the Outer Hebrides in the 18th century has been brought to the Finborough Theatre for the English premiere of Sue Glover's The Straw Chair. The production tells the story of Lady Rachel Grange, who was imprisoned by her husband on a remote island. It explores themes of female imprisonment and justice, as you might imagine. Well, Tanya has been speaking to the actress and Royal Shakespeare Company associate artist Siobhan Redmond, who stars as Grange.
Rachel Cheesley married a very powerful man who was a law lord in Scotland, and they were married for more than 20 years and had 9 children. And then he decided that he'd had enough of her. She became aware that he was dabbling in politics, which were very dangerous at the time. He was chatting with the Jacobites, and because she was not a woman who knew how to keep her mouth shut, that was very dangerous information. So he had her abducted and abandoned in various different islands in the north of Scotland, on the in the Hebrides, And this play is set in St Kilda, which is an island no longer inhabited by people. So this woman, who was a very difficult woman, and the play doesn't shy away from that, but no one deserves to be abducted and abandoned on an island. She was foisted on the community of people who lived there, who had a very isolated and, of a necessity, primitive kind of lifestyle, who spoke a language that she didn't understand. They didn't necessarily want her there. She certainly didn't want to be there. The thing that really drew me, apart from the quality of the writing, it's beautiful writing by Sue Glover, who wrote this play, is that Rachel is a character who never gives up hope despite all the evidence to the contrary. She persists in believing that there might be a better future ahead, and that's a characteristic which I don't necessarily share, but I was quite drawn to the idea of spending some time in that mindset.
Yeah, I think that's something we've all had to lean into the last couple of years. Hope is sometimes all we've had to hold on to, isn't it?
Yeah.
The play's often called the Prisoner of St Kilda, and you've kind of explained why there. Was there a difference between the other characters or the other people's perception of her and how you found her, or how she is, you know, as a person? Was there a vast difference between how people thought she was and how she actually was?
Well, as far as actual history is documented, and of course we have to remember that much of it was written by people who were not necessarily sympathetic to her, and women who speak their minds, regardless of the situation and the circumstances, have always been and continue to be regarded as difficult. And the play is very good at looking at the borderline between madness and badness. But I would suggest that if you have been abducted and you've lost teeth and hair in the process, you've been shut up on the first stage of your journey in a room with boarded windows and no light allowed in, and then abandoned on an island, you would probably start to go mad, however precarious your grip on sanity had been in the first place. So I have now passed through the door into the version of Rachel that is in this play, and I can't really tell you accurately anymore with a dispassionate eye what's going on with her, because I've had to make what seem to me to be logical connections between the things that she says that seem outlandish and a version of the truth. But certainly we continue to find outspoken women uncomfortable, and when the other characters in the play deal with her, you can see the wonderful Rory Hawthorne and Finlay Bain, who are a young married couple. He is a minister and she's his 17-year-old wife. They've come from Edinburgh to give the people of St Kilda some pastoral care. They haven't had a minister there for a long time. And their experience of Rachel is very extreme and actually quite different. Quite quickly, there is a bond established between young Isabel and Rachel.
I've picked up on a few quite interesting points that you've spoken about, where, you know, you've said women who speak out are perceived in a certain way, and they were then, and perhaps arguably in some certain instances are now. What are some of the themes that you think are explored in this play which kind of play true today as well?
Well, I think firstly, a really important one is female friendship, intergenerational female friendship. There's another female character in the play, the islander, Una, played by Jenny Lee, and she has been lumbered with the task of dealing with this, there's Jenny there, of dealing with this woman. She speaks English, and it's her job to try and stop Rachel from jumping off a rock, to try and make sure that she eats, to just keep her alive, basically, even though the islanders don't really want her there and she doesn't want to be there. So Una's got the short straw with that. But the kind of relationships that exist between these three women and the way that they all either deal with or reference the one male character in the play, who certainly has more power or agency, as we say now, than the women, but who comes to realise that he too is entirely dependent upon the favour of a few very powerful men who run the whole system. So it looks at how empowered people are, how they perceive themselves to be in the society in which they find themselves, what they can do to make their lot better, whether or not they should speak up about it and the price they might have to pay for doing so. And also at our tendency to lock up women who are difficult. I mean, even now, there are many women in prison for what seem to be fairly trifling offences, first offences, compared to the numbers of men who are in prison for equivalent offences. So, and also I should say, although a lot of the things it deals with are both weighty and timely, it's also funny because there is something delightful about characters who have no inhibition about speaking their mind. It can be very uncomfortable, but it's also quite enjoyable as long as you're not on the receiving end of what they're saying.
So you're a spectator in it all.
Yes,
You're not on the risk.
Quite.
That's The Straw Chair, and it's on at Finborough Theatre until the 14th of May. Let's just take one final check on the weather before we leave you. Some breaks in the cloud this evening, allowing temperatures to dip into single figures by first thing tomorrow. Tomorrow does look good. It'll be fine and a warm day. Highs of around 21 degrees. Always quite a bit of cloud around. Friday, sunshine and showers, but again, feeling pleasant with highs of around 20 degrees once more. That's your lot for this evening, unfortunately, but we will see you tomorrow at 6. But for now, good night.